As a working mom, I went on this trip at the beginning of April. I was pulling out of the driveway. I pulled out and just started bawling. I was like, I can't believe I'm leaving them. What are they going to think? How are they going to be? How am I going to be? Can I even create? But I just had to say to myself, in this moment, there's no way they could know the risk I'm taking or the way I'm trying to use the gifts I feel like I've been given to nurture and to grow. I want River and Shep to see me at least trying. I just hope they see mom and dad believed in risk and they went for it.
I'm curious, like your dynamic of work. I know you're working from home a little bit with what you're doing, but you're also like, you have a studio or like a space you can go to and kind of, or you meet people outside of the house. So like, what's the dynamic with like what's your week look like, I guess, as far as like on a regular basis, semi-regular basis?
Well, no week really looks the same. Just some of that is with kids and some of that is Zane and I both having, dynamic work where he's with a client sometimes, I'm with a client sometimes, he'll travel sometimes, I'll travel. But I mean, a normal week, I guess, would look like Mondays we have a different babysitter actually come in the mornings on Mondays, kick off our week, get that going. And then Monday afternoons, I always have a standing meeting with a client that I go into their space. So after that meeting, then I go home, work a little bit as well. Then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday we have Hannah full time. And so those are the days I really think through, okay, scheduling a podcast, go if I have other meetings with someone, coffee, something like that. But that's also when I'm like, okay, I got to actually execute in these days. And that's the only time I can really sit and focus for an extended amount of time. Then Friday, we have Family Friday morning, and Zane and I both take off in the mornings. And then he'll go into the studio around noon, and I get started around noon after I get the kids lunch and get them down for their naps. Then Hannah comes Friday afternoon. Yeah. And that's kind of our normal week.
That's great.
How we go.
One thing Zane mentioned when we talked was he felt like the lifestyle that you guys have, so like you're both working, but like it's still flexible. Like it's not like a typical like mom and dad are both working, whatever. Right. And one thing he kind of hit on was like kind of the dynamic that the kids growing up in that environment, like the pros, the cons, like just kind of like all around, like what would you say that they would be able to take away from like the way that the dynamic that you guys have at home now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, right. I mean, I pray it's nurturing to them, and they see it as something positive for sure. I think the thing as a working mom, I try like my why a lot because it's hard some days I went on this trip at the beginning of April and I was going to be gone from Saturday to Thursday. So what's that? 5 days. I'd never been gone from him for that long. Mm-hmm. And I know this is so cliche, but I literally was driving out. I was pulling out of the driveway and they were getting in the car to go to a birthday party. And I pulled out and just started bawling. I was like, why did I say yes to and the trip was insane. I can't even believe I got to go on it. I got to go down to Sonic Ranch and help a friend at this recording studio that most people would be like, Zane's like, that's my dream. How did anyhow, all that to say, I was pulled out and was just crying. Like, I can't believe I'm leaving them. What are they going to think? How are they going to be? How am I going to be? Can I even create knowing they're back? I knew they were well taken care of. I was not, their safety and their well-being, I was not concerned about. But I just had to say to myself, in this moment, there's no way they could know the risk I'm taking or the way I'm trying to use the gifts I feel like I've been given to nurture and to grow. I'm trying to grow. Like, we're all learning, right? Yeah. Like, I'm still learning how to do that too, but I want River and Shep to see me at least trying and trying to get outside of myself and trying to believe in, I need something to create and I want something to create. Maybe I don't need it, but I want it. And so I just hope they see mom and dad like they believed in risk and they went for it.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I don't know what that'll look like because that wasn't my upbringing and that wasn't Zane's, but we ended up where we are. I think that's where you just got to trust they'll end up where they're like, I believe the grace of God's going to get them where they are supposed to be as well. And yeah, she's already got to see things that I'm like, just, I don't know, just really cool thing. Not that the big moments are all that matters. 'Cause to her, she probably just wants us home. She doesn't,
Right.
She wants us home every single day. If she could choose, we would literally watch her jump on her trampoline. We would also watch her read a book. We'd watch her eat her breakfast. She just wants us there all the time, Shep's too little to know what's going on, and he just runs around going crazy anyway. So, but yeah, I do hope it blesses them ultimately. And I'm sure Zane told you this as well. We'll be the first to lay it down for them. Like, we're not going to build a career on the altar of our kids.
Yeah.
Our priorities are God, Zane and I, our marriage, our kids, and then work. So if something is coming, obviously we can't not work and just be with our kids all the time. But if there's a tension we're feeling that we have to choose one or the other, we'll lay down work every time. Hopefully every time. I say, we're trying to do our best is what I'm saying.
No, that's so good. No, really, really good. What would you say, like, right now? Okay, so like you've been thinking a little bit in the future now, but like in the current, like, last couple weeks, what's been the hardest part of giving your fullest to your kids, but also giving your fullest to your career?
Oof. Well, I'm actually in a very full season right now. With a couple clients I have. It always depends on my flow kind of depends on the flow of the client. What do they have going on? How big of a moment is it for them? I have a client right now in Nashville that she's releasing a ton of music. So her release looks like a ramp up in mine because we've got to push to get all of this content created. And we're on tight deadlines of specifically her record label. So, but it was the end of school for River. So I'm trying to get teachers' baskets made and end of school pictures and get her summer camps. And every mom, at the end of May is saying all these same things. But what it really looked like was I work until 5:30 when I don't have childcare anymore, when Hannah leaves and when Zane gets home. We do supper together. We do bath and prayers and bedtime, and then I go back to work from about 8:30 to midnight every night, which is not sustainable. Do not recommend. And thankfully, Zane is so patient with me and full of grace in it because, it is a bit of a grind in that way. But ultimately, I was kind of talking to Zane about the other day of like, so many working professionals have a busy season, right? Like a CPA. They know from January 31st till April 15th when taxes get filed, it's just busy season, right? But in creative work, that's not necessarily built into a calendar. It's a lot more of an ebb and flow, which is sometimes good, but sometimes hard. And thankfully in this moment, Zane and I's busy season isn't at the same time. So, he can give a little more right now. But I can always tell in myself when it's getting a little too much that I'm like, okay, I got to say no somewhere. Or, our son got sick last week and it's like, okay, or actually my grandfather passed away this weekend and I just had to text clients and be like, I'm so sorry. I had deadlines on Friday, but I'm so sorry. I can't, I need to push these till next week. And that's just, I don't know. It's just life of being real and realizing hopefully you're working for people who really understand that as well. I'm a one man. I don't have anybody else I can pass it off to. And I've strategically done that because for me to hire and scale means I'm managing another person, which means my mental capacity is getting less and less, as a mom, which, I know your wife knows this as well. Just the unseen things you're navigating up there of, getting diapers ordered and, do they have summer clothes and Are they, all of those things just take space. And so I'm not at a point where I feel like I want to scale, hire someone and manage another person. So that means I just have to say no. Yeah. And if that's never lost me a job now, thankfully. But if it did, I think I'd be okay with that, because at some point my kids will be in school and I can build in a different way. Yeah. But I don't get these years back. And, Zane and I have a deep conviction to really invest in building their souls right now and their foundation and their attachment and all of those, things. So that's just where I am as a mom right now of I'm not going to keep scaling and growing for the sake of growth or for the sake of what it feels like, the pressure or what in America is how you're winning and you're succeeding. Yeah. Which takes a whole different conversation about what is success, right? As a creative, as a parent, I think Zane and I have had to reframe what is success to us. And that looks a lot more like, do you feel loved? Do the kids feel loved? Do I feel loved? Do we have peace when we lay our heads down at night? That we're winning. If everyone's feeling loved, which isn't every day, with kids, and if we have peace, and I'm not mistaking peace for comfortability, because I think that's not the same. I can be full in this stretch season and I have peace in a lot of areas, but I'm uncomfortable because I'm out of my depth, but we do feel like we have peace in this season. And that's what I guess is important and winning for us. So as long as everyone feels love and peace, mostly like 70% of the time, we're good.
That's success. Yeah. No, that's so good. Let's talk so with what you're doing now, you're working, with an artist in Nashville. Before that, you've done a lot of creative direction, art direction in general. How did you get started? Did you start with graphic design? How did you kind of even get into the creative industry as a whole?
Great question. I first started when I was 16. I was yearbook editor, my high school yearbook. Heck yeah. And I fell in love with layout design. I mean, I would sit in there. My yearbook teacher would let me go in late at night. And I would oh my gosh, I loved it. I could do it for hours. I wanted to go in on the weekend and I would I don't even know. It wasn't even Adobe software. This is aging me. I can't even remember what the software was, but it wasn't InDesign back then. It was something else. And I just fell in love with it. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, wait, graphic design is a thing. I can major in this in school. So I went to college, got my BFA, my Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Graphic Design. Okay. Graduated in 2010, and I was working at this t-shirt, sports t-shirt manufacturing company in the art department, and that is where I learned every shortcut in Adobe Illustrator. I learned to get quick. I learned how to build vectors out of JPEGs. I just learned, I would tell anyone, yes, you learn stuff in school, but man, when you're on the job and especially a production environment where you just gotta learn, it's not necessarily creative at that point. It's just skills. Learn what, all of your shortcuts are on your keyboard, and learn all of how you save file, just all of the technical part of design, right? Because the aesthetic part of design is changing all the time. Yeah. And we've always got to, be inspired and be aware of that. But the technical piece, control copy, control paste, control set, control Z, undo, that's not changing. That's all the same. So learn those ones. And then a friend from college actually reached out and she's like, hey, I just moved back to Kansas City and our friends are kind of starting this agency. It was actually so special. When I was driving down here today, I drove by the first office I worked in when I moved to Kansas City. It's right down the street in the Crossroads.
What are they still
They're not
around?
there anymore.
What was it called?
It was called Quartermaster Marketing back then. Yeah. Okay. And it was not, there was nothing beautiful about it. Literally the main client was a plumbing manufacturer. So I literally worked on plumbing brochures. We tried to make it pretty, but you can only make it so pretty, right? So she was like, would you want to come work here? they're looking for a graphic designer. And honestly, back then I was like, no, I want to go to New York. I want to go to LA, which now I'm like, I guess it's not ever totally off the table, but I'm like, thank goodness I came here, you know?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, maybe I'll go, you know, interview, and it can be my stepping stone then to go somewhere else or whatever. Here I am, 13 years later? So I came up here, anyhow, got a job there, worked there for several years, went from a graphic designer to an art director there, and learned so much. The client side of creativity and agency, how to work for a creative director, how to work with, you know, so many things. Then from that point, I went and worked in ministry for a few years, was an art director there. And then that's when I got pregnant with River. And so I just took a little time off. I actually worked part-time for the Regional Arts Council, Arts KC. They're amazing people. And that's when I was like, okay, what do I want to do now that I've had a baby? I don't want to leave her. I want to be invested in how she is, you know, growing and learning. So I worked part-time for a while, and then that's when I realized, like, I think more of my wiring is to somehow work as well as help with the kids. So with a lot of encouragement from Zane, that's when Zane was like, I think you just need to work for yourself. And, you know, I was so scared. I was like, no, I don't want to do freelance or be self-employed or whatever. And he's like, he just kept encouraging me. And so finally, this was in the middle of the pandemic too. In August of 2020 is when I was like, okay, rewind. I had one of my dear friends at the time came to me. Her name's Joni. And she was like, I'm going to start this women's boutique. Would you help me with all of the branding of it? I would love to have your help. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I would love to. But at that point, I thought I'm just going to help her do the logo, packaging, whole brand suite, you know, hand it over to her. I didn't realize how much content and work that would be moving forward. So I said yes to that. And then at that point, I was like, oh, I'm actually making more money working for myself. Maybe I follow this a little bit. Not that it's just about the money, but when you're a mom, you don't walk out the door unless someone's walking in and you start paying that person.
Right.
So just as a business person, I'm thinking, well, I can't go in the red. If I'm paying this person X amount of dollars to come in here and watch my kids, I've got to at least be making certain amount of money. So, that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to fully do this thing. And the second I put myself out there and said, like, I'm working for myself, just a flood of work came in. And I had only had childcare for 20 hours a week at that point. And I got myself in trouble again, and I was working till midnight every night. And I quickly had more than 40 hours of work. And at that point, I was still trying to learn how to track, the workflow of it.
Yeah.
Because you don't fully know, and I know you get this too, you don't know when you say yes to something necessarily how many hours that is going to take.
Absolutely.
So you're trying, but, with kids, you can't just work whenever you want to work. You got to have someone watching the kids too. So we increased childcare, and we're trying to, figure out that piece. And now I work full time, but yeah, from home. I don't have a space I go into. I just literally work from my bedroom. Most of my clients, though, I go out to their, or I go to their space. And the reason I did that was because then we had our second baby, our son Shepherd, and I wanted to be able to stay home and nurse him and be with him. So I would literally, maybe this is TMI for the men listening, but I literally would go in my bedroom and work. And when it was 3 hours and he was ready to eat, I would have Hannah bring him in, and I would nurse him, and he would go back out there, and I'd work.
Just some more work.
Literally did that for 9 months. And then I was like, okay. But I love going out and having lunch with him. Literally today, I was having some quiet time before coming down here, and Shep just barges in my bedroom, you know, literally opens the door, runs in, and it's chaos and it's cute and mostly cute. Maybe mostly chaos,
Mostly
but
chaos.
yeah, you guys get it. So yeah, it's been a wild ride how it's all unfolded, but I think I can truly say I think I'm where I'm supposed to be. And even though there's struggle in it, it feels graced for sure.
Yeah.
It's never going to be easy, but I was actually reading this thing yesterday, and it was talking about how strength can come from constraint. And I was like, strength from constraint, that seems like the opposite of what we're told now, right? It's like, no, we want, you know, work from home and all the benefits. And no, we don't want constraint. We want freedom. We want, you know.
Right.
And so I was kind of like thinking about that thought, and it was the book I was reading. It was this illustration, and it was an illustration about a river. So of course I'm going to love that, right? So cheesy. And it was talking about how when a river's flowing and it cuts in between rock, like in the Grand Canyon, the constraint on the water actually creates a ton of power and strength. And there's rapids coming, but it creates all this power and movement. And then when it gets out into a flat space, it's just gentle and easy again. And I was like, wow, maybe that's why in the last couple years I've felt a different kind of power and strength in my work and in myself, is because it's the constraint of kids, or it's the constraint of a schedule.
Yep.
Where it's almost like a paradox, right? You would think, oh, a wide open schedule would give you more power and creativity, but I think it actually is the constraint of all of this as a mom trying to figure it out, or any parents, really. That's not just for the moms, it's for the dads too, of trying to figure out how to do it with the constraints you have now, because it looks different. It just is different, you know, with kids. So anyhow, I think there's a certain power and strength that's come from all the constraint of being a mom. So
for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, there's even, I think a lot of young creatives, and I could say this about myself even a couple of years ago, but even when it comes to not even just productivity and work and life, but even like, you know, we say like, oh, like, I don't want any boundaries, or I just want to create freely, or I just want to whatever. And I remember one time I was working for a church, and there was some pretty strict, you know, deadlines and different things, and I had to get a video done by a certain time, and I just felt like there was too many like things.
yeah.
And as a young creative, I'm like, man, get off my back. Like, just let me create, dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, leave me alone. But I slowly began to realize and learn the hard lesson that, like, those restraints or constraints, like you're saying, are actually what enable you to be more creative.
Yeah.
And whenever you have guidelines or like people like to use an analogy of like a box, like don't put me in a box,
Yes.
kind of thing. But the truth is, like, forget about other people's box or the box that you're in versus the box somebody else is in. But like, if this is the box you're in right now, just be as creative as you can in your box.
Totally.
And then eventually it will unlock, and there'll be other boxes to be creative in.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with, in fact, it's actually really healthy for there to be those boundaries.
100%.
And it forces you to be creative within the bounds of the things that you feel like are holding you back, and you learn to actually be creative regardless of those boundaries.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, I think that ties into that, where it's just like, I know that for me, that was a really big thing, especially like 20, 21, 22,
Yeah.
just kind of like, you know, we just want to be like, especially the whole Enneagram thing, like the 4s are very like, you know, creative and flowy.
I'm unique. Yeah. Are you a 4?
I'm a 3 wing 4.
Oh, okay.
So I'm mostly 3, but I'm definitely have my like heavy 4 moments.
Yeah. You feel the 4s.
Yeah.
The 4s feel the 4s.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I actually heard a similar illustration once about boundaries that has always stuck with me, not necessarily just for creativity, but life in general. I actually love this about parenting. Is someone told me, you know, like, if you bought a house right next to a really busy road and your kids wanted to go out and play in the backyard, you wouldn't really feel right putting them out in the backyard and letting them play and have their imagination, all that, because you'd be scared about the busy road. But if you built a fence around that backyard, that fence as the boundary actually gives them more freedom, because now they can go out there and run around the whole thing. They can use their imagination. You don't have to hover over them.
Yep.
It's the fence that actually, the boundary that actually does bring the freedom, you know, versus not having it. And then it's unsafe at that point. So yeah, it's a similar to the box.
That's so good. It's so true. It creates a safe space to be able to create. No, that's good.
Yeah. And thrive in that. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back into a little bit of like what you're doing creatively right now. So you're working with a really big artist in Nashville. How did that come about? Like, was it just like relationship or like?
You know, that's actually, I'm glad we're going here, because when you first asked me, you know, if I'd be part of this, and I was like, I don't have any, like, what can I add? And I was like, man, if there was one takeaway I wish I could have told my younger self, it's relationships really are everything, which I know we've all heard 1,000 times, but I genuinely don't think I'm where, which I have so much further, you know. It's a weird place to sit and like talk about where you're at, and you're like, but you know, anyhow, every job, I think 95% of the jobs I've ever gotten are friends, word of mouth or a friend of a friend. I didn't even have my own website. I'm a graphic designer, art director. I didn't even build my own website for 2 years into working for myself. The work was always just coming. So I didn't necessarily need to market myself or put myself out there. Yeah. Which I'm so grateful for. But I also know that's not everyone's experience. And sometimes it's better. In fact, I would probably tell anyone to brand yourself and launch. And I didn't even take my own advice. But yeah, so a lot of my clients right now, one of my dear, dear friends I grew up with, her name's Nicole. She was in our wedding. She's been a friend for forever. She's actually a songwriter in Nashville, and she's a head of a record label out there as well, all-female record label.
Cool.
And she's an inspiration in so many ways. But I started working for her. I've always worked, you know, her and I did her baby announcements and, you know, you know, like an EP way back in the day, or just helped her with any of her, you know, birthday party invites, just all the fun stuff. T-shirt. I used to make all these T-shirts for her of her song lyrics. Anyhow, just, you know, all the things. But she put out her first debut album last year, and she asked me to help with all of the branding and graphic design, art direction on that, which was such an honor. And then from that, when she put that out, then now people were asking her, hey, who helped you? And you know, we don't live in Nashville, so it's actually been super cool to get to be part of that without even being there. Yeah. But yeah, it was all friend of a friend. You know, I don't have like a big portfolio or list of people I've worked with. It was just this artist, Kimberly Perry. She was from the band Perry. Actually, back in 2010, they wrote that song. She wrote that song, If I Die Young.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that one. I was actually thinking of that the other day, because I graduated college in 2010. And I was like, if you would have told me that day that a decade later, she was going to rewrite that song, If I Die Young Part 2, and I was going to get to do all the album covers and release and invites and her merch and all of that, there's no way. I mean, I would have thought, I'd have to be in Nashville to do that.
Right.
But it's pretty amazing. I'm super grateful that I got to be part of that, just from living in Kansas City and, you know, building a life here with my husband and raising kids. And so that's been super cool to get to be part of that. I'm very grateful. But it all goes back to relationships and character. And, you know, I try and do what I say I'm going to do. I try and be honest about where things are. I try and communicate really well. I try and underpromise, overdeliver, which I'm getting myself in a little bit of a tricky spot with that right now, just because, once again, I think something I'm really trying to learn right now is where was my first yes and who was that to first, and being faithful and loyal to that. So if I told someone yes first, I work on that project first rather than being maybe opportunistic of, well, this one's bigger, which sometimes that is a tricky thing. I would love to even know your thoughts maybe on that, of how to prioritize, because sometimes something is bigger and more money.
Yeah.
But you said yes to something else first, and so you want to be loyal and faithful to that. And that's definitely, maybe you asked that earlier. I also ramble so much, so
no.
Make me land this plane. When I asked Zane last night, I was like, "Oh, I'm nervous about this." He's like, "You're an external processor. You're going to do amazing. Just keep talking." I was like, "No, I don't want to." Anyhow, so
No,
I
it's
would
so
say
good.
that's probably the trickiest part for me right now, is how to navigate prioritizing work that is coming in and you can't make everyone happy. So what ball do you let drop at what point?
Yeah.
And hopefully someone told me this one time, like maybe there's glass balls and maybe there's like rubber balls, like let the rubber one drop. It'll bounce back up. But like my kids are probably the glass, no one else is their mom. So try not to let that one drop. And I don't know, if you just do the best you can and give your best, I really think people can see that, and they're patient and gracious with you.
For sure.
When they really know that you're trying your best, you're not just making things up or not responding, or listen, trust me, it's hard to always get back to everyone, because you're like, oh, I have to tell you again, I still don't have, you're asking me where your work is, and
still not ready.
It's still not ready, But I think when they know that you're trying your best, I think they're patient and gracious with you for the most part. Or
for sure.
Thankful. I feel spoiled, because everyone I have worked with to this point, I've never had someone just like get super mad at me.
Right. Well, and I think it's like in the way that you carry yourself too. Like both you and Zane, like there's a way of like walking in integrity in the way that you do your work. And I think, like you're saying, people feel that.
Yeah.
Like people recognize that, people notice that. And especially like the creative industry, there's a lot of, and I'm guilty of this too, honestly, so much, but like there's a lot of us who are just really fickle.
Yeah.
Like truthfully. And so it's like, if you can just not be fickle, do your best to actually like you said, respond to people, do your best to actually like, people can feel it. And so I feel like when you're doing that, as far as the like knowing which, obviously like family, not dropping those balls, as far as like work, I think it's so different for everybody. It does really come down to like, I never heard that analogy about the rubber balls.
Oh yeah.
Because I do think you can sense sometimes you'll have clients who are like, they just are they want to work with you because of you.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between like, maybe like you have some corporate client that just wants to get the job done.
Yeah.
And then there's also the conversation, like sometimes it's like you never want to like burn bridges, but then sometimes you have to decide like, are there times where it's okay to do that?
Yeah.
But I definitely don't have any answers around any of that kind of stuff. I definitely wouldn't say that I've had enough of those situations come around to where I feel like I could like specifically speak to that kind of stuff. But I do know that like you guys walk with integrity, and because you walk with integrity, people feel that.
Yeah.
Maybe some of them are friends of friends, or there's at least some relationship. So it's not like some rando that's coming to you to work with you. It's like
great point.
There's some personal connection or relationship with you. And so again, they're like, they're more understanding because they actually realize at the end of the day, like you are a person.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you're working with, and I have worked with some corporate clients, like some video work. And again, they're not always concerned about you. You're just the ends to a mean to get a project done.
Yep.
So those people do exist, unfortunately. But still, how we handle ourselves in those moments still speaks a lot.
Yeah, it's still our witness and our character at that point. Yeah,
for sure. No, that's great to hear that. Like, that's encouraging that like everyone that you've worked with so far, and it seems like you said, you're constantly working with people. I mean, it's been 3 years now, right, that you've
Almost,
been doing
yeah.
it. I mean, like, when you look at the next 3 years, what are you excited about? Like, what do you
Wow.
see, you know what I mean? Like, what do you see as like, what would you do different over versus the last, I mean, obviously the first year you probably were figuring out a lot of like flow and balancing but then what's funny is like, as you're figuring those things out, what typically happens is you still continuously get more and more work.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're figuring it out as the situation's changing at the same
Yeah.
time. But I mean, like when you look at the next 3 years, all the lessons you've learned, even in the past 3 years, what are you doing to like, or what do you see yourself doing to implement to like do the next 3 years even better?
Oh, great question. Well, now, like hearing you ask that, I'm like, oh, it's kind of like raising kids actually, because the second
Yeah.
you figure it out, then it changes, and you figure, you got to figure something else out. I think just for me, because I know I keep going back to a mom, but it just
Yeah.
shapes so much of my decision. It literally shapes every decision I make pretty much during the day. So, I mean, in 3 years, River will be in school full time, and Shepherd would be in preschool. My world will look, Zane and I's world will look so much different.
Yeah.
The amount, I know then you add in activities, and we've never done that and all that stuff, but I just can't, I just think of the mental capacity and even so many moms that are ahead of me that I've asked questions and have been so kind to, kind of walk us through this or help us, it's like they say a lot, which I'm sure you guys know this and feel this and have felt this too. Parenting in the younger days is so physically demanding, and then it gets more emotionally demanding, maybe mentally demanding as you start parenting teen issues or older kids. So right now it's just so physically demanding of, if I'm not working, I'm taking care of the kids. Zane and I both are. And, even on weekends, there's no exhale. There is when they're nap, but it's,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's like, these are the days. I know, I know it. I don't wish it away. I just know once they're in school, I'm going to have a different amount of space.
Yep.
Or I think that I would probably at that point look at scaling into maybe some sort of agency or production house or something like that. I love doing graphic design and the execution part. That part is just so time consuming. If there was even a time I could get more on the art directing, business, relational side, because this too, as a self-employed creative, you're the graphic designer. You go and get new business, your client relations, you're invoicing proposals and billing, you're navigating all your own finances, you're doing your own taxes, you're, all of those things. I mean, if you even knew how behind on billing I am right now, it's like, thank God my husband works too. And anyhow, it's just, I think I would get more specialized in exactly what it is I feel like I'm good at. And I think even though I do love the graphic design piece, I think it would be more of probably art directing client business a little more, and could hopefully hire a designer at some point to then just art direct, like, hey, here's what we're thinking. And I think I've kept my graphic design skill sharp, but I don't even have the capacity and time now to go learn everything new and to really stay up on, especially with social media content, like how to do, which I don't really get into the reels videos type, but like even just staying up with all of that is a whole nother piece of your brain and capacity, mental capacity that it takes. So, and the kids coming up I was even thinking this about our own kids, like, what kind of content are they going to make?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what it's going to look like in 15, 20 years when our kids are creating, or maybe they're just school teachers and that's still creative too. But maybe River and Shep, and Reb and Bishop, maybe they want to go hold, maybe they see this creative thing and they're like, not for me. I don't know. Like, they'll be whoever they're meant to be. But I think of that too, of like, at some point, do I work more of the administrational creative side of my brain, which I am way type A. Like, all my hours, everything's in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
All of our budget is in a spreadsheet. Like I naturally just, I calendar everything. Like that's a way more of my workflow, where Zane is just like way more off in left field creative. And we make a great team in that, where he still knows how to be administrational and I still know how to be creative, but our natural lane we go to is he's a little more imaginative, creative, and I can go a little more like how to get the systems in place to keep it all running. So I think maybe that's where I would go in 3 years, but I don't know. I'm also open. My hands are open. Like I try and stay like that even now in this, of when work is coming, or if it's, just staying open-handed about it and don't get too, just grabbing, not desperate in scarcity, just knowing, in doing your best. I do think that attracts more work. And I think, like we were talking earlier, birds of a feather flock together. I think that's going to naturally, people who are like-minded, even like this, are naturally going to find each other and work together. And I've had times when it's not that, and it's almost like I knew from the start, like I should have passed this off to someone else, or I should have said no, but I said yes. And then it's just like beating your head against the wall the whole time. And it's not just for me, it's for the client too. I'm like, oh, I should have handed this off to someone different that had a different skill set or a different communication style or whatever it is. And so I'm trying to get better at learning that, and knowing saying no to it doesn't mean I'm missing out on money or missing out on opportunity. It's actually going to work better for that person and someone else to do it. And then that's going to leave space for something that fits better with me to do as well. And I get you also, and in the same breath, I would say, if I was 22, I would not tell myself that. I would say, take everything that comes your way. It doesn't matter if it's cool or not, do it, and learn how to work with a client and learn how to serve other people. But now at 35, and as a mom, I'm a little more selective of like, I just don't think this one's working for both of us. And I'm still learning that. I'm still totally learning that. But I think it saves everyone in the long run to be like, yeah, no.
Well, and it speaks to, if I'm a client coming to you to get work done, and you can say, hey, I'm not a good fit for you. Like, that speaks volumes even to your ability to not just take on everything. It even elevates you even more, even in their mind. Yeah. Even though they may not ever work with you, but they could still be an advocate for you somewhere down the line where they're referring somebody else.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean? You never know what trickle effect that's a great point.
But again, from my perspective, it just falls even more in line with just doing business with integrity. You know what I mean? Like, you're coming from a place of doing it with humility and integrity, and being honest with like, hey, we're not a good fit, and that's okay. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I truthfully want the best for you too.
Yes, 100%.
That's the difference.
And I do think it's a different mentality, like you're saying. I think it goes from, I'm really trying to serve you, versus I'm just trying to get my vision through.
Right.
Like, and I think that's something actually working in a church setting really teaches, which is a good skill to learn, of how to serve someone else and how to serve someone else's vision, and how to almost use discernment and your intuition. This is a few of my biggest clients right now. It's like I can just read what they want now at this point. And I'm not going, oh man, this was my favorite cover design, I'm pushing this one for you to use. Ultimately, the same thing. I'm like, if I gave you 10 album cover mocks, I want you to be happy and fulfilled in your vision.
Right.
This is not my project. Like, yes, you hired me to execute something, but ultimately I really do just want to serve you.
Right.
And I want to serve your vision. And I feel like even times in a collaborative setting that I've been a part of, you can feel when someone on the team is really specifically wanting their vision to come through more than they want the person we're all serving's vision to come through. And I think that's a maturity piece too, that, I mean, I know I was like that when I was younger too, of you just get so stuck on what you think is best versus going, no, how can I serve your vision more? And I feel like the more I've learned that, the actual more people have trusted and keep coming back to me instead of like, oh, I got this one project, one and done, one and done, because it really is more, time efficient to have the same client, because you learn them so much, you learn them so fast. But I know that's probably not for everyone either.
Yeah.
But that's what works for me, is the serving them piece and really trying to take care of them.
Yeah, no, and I would definitely say that it should be the perspective of everybody. Like, especially if you're in a service-based business, because not all creative industry stuff is service-based, but like you're offering a service, right? So it's like it should be of service.
Yeah.
It should be, it's serving the client.
Should be happening.
It's in the word, so it's like, it's very apparent. And like, whereas Zane, they can just track some guitars and, like ultimately they're trying to serve maybe an end user, but they're also just trying to like create something. Yeah.
It is totally different. And he and I, even as self-employed creatives, our worlds look so different because, we joke, everyone thinks that being self-employed is your own boss. And we're like, oh no, we just now have 10 bosses.
Yeah.
Whoever my client is, that's, directing how I, do my work. And same for Zane. Zane's a little different. Zane is very unique in specifically the sync licensing world. His joke, which is not a joke, but it's real, but he's like, I show up every day for free. I go and sit at my computer, and the second I start designing, I'm billing someone.
Right.
So I know I'm making, which is nice as paying for childcare. Is I'm like, okay, I know I'm at least, we're not going in the red, like I said. But Zane's just out there like fully living. I mean, we're both living on a prayer, but he's showing up just trying to create something that day, then submitting it to his licensing company, hoping someone license it.
Right.
So it's such a different, and I'm sure he talks about all of this, so maybe I'm being redundant, but it is a different, even within the creative industry, that looks so different for him. And I respect him so much for doing that, because I don't think, my motivation, I think, is the piece of not just money, but okay, this is working, this makes sense. There's some stability here. His is, I don't think I could do. I know I couldn't do. We always joke about it. Like, I could not do what he does, to just show up every day and create out of nowhere and with no real,
I mean, you maybe, we did talk a little bit about this, about how like there are guys and girls in the licensing world who will create tracks specifically for a thing that's trending right now, or a thing but really with his personality, like that's not him. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to create something that could stand alone on Spotify or Apple Music, whatever, and be enjoyed that way. And there'd be artistry in it. And if it also takes off on MusicBed, cool. Right. You know what I mean? But like, it's first actually art for them, not just like creating, tracks that are following the trends. And I respect that.
Oh, same.
The cool thing is, I don't fully know how the licensing works, but based off of, I know how like some video licensing works and some different things, like I would assume a lot of his stuff that was compounding. So I would assume that there's a lot of like, it may not be consistent like checks every month, but like the longer it exists, like YouTube, for example, you know what I mean? Like you have like your YouTube AdSense, that the more views it gets, it's like compounding, you know what I mean?
Well, that's a lot of his DSPs too, digital streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple. The more views he's getting, the more playlists. It's a whole different stream of revenue, but that one is definitely snowballing. Yeah. Whereas the licensing is just all one-off. It's also I think this is fascinating, just because I think creatives and finances are fascinating of like how everyone does it different and it looks different.
Yep.
How do you manage? And we get asked these questions. This conversation comes up all the time. How do you keep your financial flow? And for his restarts every month. So he gets a music bed payout every month, but like May 1st, it started at 0 again.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So then it goes from May 1st to May 31st. I think there's 31 days. Anyhow, and whatever license he sells either
In that month.
specific license and or membership of Music Bed, that payout doesn't come until June 17th. So that's how Music Bed runs, which that part is nice. At least we know something's coming the 17th of every month, but how much it is, there is no, I mean, I hope Zane talked a little bit about this of
We actually
his
didn't.
journey.
We didn't get into like the very specifics.
Oh my gosh, I could talk about this for days.
He actually said, Brooke would be able to explain all of this better.
Yeah. Watching his faith in that, for the first like 2 years of our marriage, every single month he thought it was over. He's like, this is the month we can't afford our apartment, or whatever, because it resets. So the way, and this is just for us personally, the way we've seen God provide for us, I feel like we could write an entire book on the generosity and provision of God in our lives, because it resets every month. And how do you go buy a house when you don't know what's coming in every month? How do you, tell a nanny, well, we're going to sign a year agreement and we're going to trust to pay you every week when we don't know what's coming in every month? And really, I would just say it's living on a prayer. And that's a piece that's kind of helped now with my income is at least we know when I say yes to something, there's stability there. But now obviously Zane's got enough his Google ad rev, his DSP payout. And if he does anything, like gets hired for an audio project or to produce specifically, which he does a lot, we know that, amount. But yeah.
Or he's played live with people, like he's gone on tour.
Yeah. Or when he plays live I mean, it's pretty random how all of that stuff is coming in. I don't even know if you want to fully go here, but the way we do it is every time a check comes in, we have a spreadsheet set up and every single cell has it's simple, like a formula on it. And for every check that comes in, 25% goes straight into a tax account. 10% we believe in tithing. 10% goes back to God. 10% goes to Zane's business, and 15% goes to our family we save. So all of that gets divvied up, and then we live on 45%. We live on the rest, and that's just how it's worked for us. And I think everyone's obviously their own convictions and things would look different. But we actually feel some of that, maybe the constraint piece again, the constraint of not just spending it all or saving it all or however, has really helped us to know, well, even if the month is low, because there are low months, or when the month is high, knowing to we're still setting it aside. Or if thankfully we did set it aside last month and this month's lower, we can pull from here a little bit. And we've had to figure that out. Thankfully, I told Zane and I were talking about the other day, because one of the guys out at the studio was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to manage my finances in this place. Like, how do you manage every check that comes in or something? Zane and I were laughing because actually when I was working right down the street at that ad agency, my first art director ever, he, this literally, I think this is one of the greatest pieces of advice I've ever been given. He said when iStock photography first came out, he went out and took all these stock photos. He literally would set a soccer ball in a green field, take a photo of it. Then he'd set a football in a green field, take a photo of it. And he made a ton of money off stock photography. This would have been 20 years ago when it first came out. Well, no one told him you're going to be taxed you know, 30% or 25%, whatever I mean, I think he made like several $100,000. It was a lot. So he's taxed super high, and he was still paying it off. I mean, he was like, if I can teach you anything in your freelance work, every check that comes in, you need to get in the habit of setting aside for taxes because no one's saving it for you, you know, which it scared me so bad, like his story, which fear is never a good motivator, but it worked in this case. So at that point, when Zane and I got married, I had a steady paycheck. Like we weren't freelance at that time, or self-employed as we like to say. But when we got married, I remember immediately I started every check that would come in for Zane, I would set 25% aside. And thankfully, you know, now our taxes will get a little different of like monthly or quarterly or whatever. But at that time we weren't doing that. So at the end of the year, we'd have to pay a lump sum in, which I know every creative, you know, this is not the fun stuff necessarily to talk about, but everyone's dealing with it. But, thankfully we've always had it because we've always set it aside, rather than, I feel like a lot of people have to learn this one the hard way.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't set it aside. Now I owe $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, and you're in a bad spot. Then you're trying to just dig out of that hole, you know? So that was one of that would be like the opposite of something creative to give advice, but it was like the best piece of advice is to set some money aside.
That's so real. I'm actually really curious how, with only having like self-employed income, how did you guys buy your house?
Zane's music.
Really?
Songs, yep.
So like you were able to like just pay off a large enough chunk that they were able to give you a loan, or like how did they?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we got a loan. We had to, it was kind of amazing. Honestly, it's a gift from God. We got pregnant with a River, and we were living in an apartment in the West Side. And we were like, okay, we had a 2-bedroom, but we were just trying to figure it out. And at that time, Zane was like, let's start looking for a house. And like our car had gotten stolen over there. You know, it was just a little rough. And he's like, and I don't even think I could fully go there. I was just pregnant and, you know, hormonal and whatever. But he talked to our buddy who was a realtor, and, you know, they signed us up for like the MLS. You're getting whatever. I literally don't even know what it's called, but
that's right. I think
it was divine. I was sitting at Arts KC. Zane was at his studio, and we both saw this house at the same time. Like within a matter of 5 minutes, we sent it to each other. We had looked at no houses. We'd maybe been skimming it for, you know, 3 or 4 weeks at this point. We hadn't even gone and looked at a house, and we both saw it, and we were like, oh my gosh, like, you know us young creatives, we wanted a mid-century drumming, and we want, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so we texted our realtor, and we're like, hey, can you get it? We want to go see this house tonight. It was December. It was November of 2019. So like the pictures of the house, there was snow all over. Like it looked, you know, I think that's how we got it, was the first picture just looked like this brown old house. But when you clicked to the next picture, you saw like the cathedral, the vaulted ceilings and the wall of windows, you know. Anyhow, so we went that night and looked at it, and, you know, he was like, you know, you're going to have to come with an offer over asking. But we had not been, like, we had a savings account, but we were not specifically saving for a house. And so we were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? Like, you know, trying to crunch the numbers. What can we put down for our down payment, which, determines your loan and all of this stuff. And so anyhow, we prayed about it, and I thought, you know, we should offer a much higher number than Zane does, which is literally the definition of our marriage. And he was like, if that's what you think we should offer, it wasn't like much more. It's not like the housing market now where things are going 80, you know, we offered 25,000 over the asking price, and wrote them a letter. I wrote him a letter, and we had just done River's gender reveal like 2 days before. So I put a picture of the gender reveal, and, you know, I was like, we're both creative and artistic. We would love to raise our kids in this house. We just found out we're having a little girl, and I don't know if our offer was the most or if our letter was the most. It was a 93-year-old woman.
Wow.
Who had the house, so nothing had been renovated on. Anyhow, so all of that. So then we go through the process of getting the mortgage, which was maybe the most stressful thing we've ever done in our marriage, because they were trying to underwrite Zane's income, but it's royalty based,
Right.
which is that's not familiar in Kansas City. No one really knew. Even our mortgage lender was like, I don't fully even know how to quantify. You guys, it looks so high risk. And I'm like, this is so silly. Like, you could see 3 years of his income was more than sufficient to get the mortgage, but it's just so risky because there's nothing guaranteed. So it's really actually a little frustrating for creatives how the system is set up. If you went and worked at Chipotle and just they knew that you had a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, even if it's $18 an hour, you are more likely to get a mortgage lended to you in this country than if you are a creative making, great money, but it's royalty based. So unless you have, all of the money in your bank account to put down, which we did not. So they had to go to multiple underwriters, and finally they got it worked up that, it was so stressful. They were like, I was only working part-time at the time. They're like, I think you're going to need to go get a full-time job, just silly stuff. But anyhow, it all worked out. Like the Lord provided that much. We had, the down payment. We were able to put it down ourselves. And I think Zane sold some huge license that month or something, like it was awesome. And then we renovated the whole thing ourselves in 6 weeks while I was 7 months pregnant. Well, with a ton of friends. I shouldn't say ourselves. When I say ourselves, that's not a clear picture because we had so much help from
But you didn't hire like contractors?
No, we didn't hire. We did not have a contractor, no. But yeah, that's a great question, because I do think as creatives, it's sometimes intimidating to think, well, do I have to just get some massive thing that then we can put $20, $30, $40, $50,000 down or whatever it is? And in our experience, the answer is no. But we would say, in our heart, that's where I think the Lord knew the desire of our heart and saw the season we were in and knew that we were growing as a family and, needed more space or whatever it was, and provided for us. So that was, I forgot about that story, but it's pretty cool.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I was curious just because I'm shocked with, because I know like typically they want 3 years, at least to see the last 3 years. But I didn't know that like even after seeing the 3 years that they would still be like, I thought that I always assumed that after 3 years, they just took the average of those 3 years and said that was your annual.
Right. Well, and I'm sure you know this too. The tricky thing about being a self-employed person is you're trying to get, so you have your profit that you made.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to get your expenses. So you're actually trying to get, so like, I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's say you made $100,000. Well, you don't want to pay taxes on $100,000. You want to have $20,000 of expenses. So then it only looks like you made $80,000, right? When you're like, well, I really made $100,000, but I bought a new computer and I rent a space or whatever. But they're going off your lowest number. They're going off the number that you filed your taxes on. So that's another tricky thing is, well, if you're only showing you made $80,000 in income, can you afford a $300,000 house? That type of thing. You're like, well, no, I still have the money coming in. It's just a really interesting, space to be in and figure that all out. That for sake of paying taxes, you want to show the least amount of income you can make, but for the sake of buying a house, you want to show that you have enough income to buy a house. So it's a little bit of a dance there, but.
No, that's good.
I don't want it to be too intimidating. Like we were intimidated, but it worked, anything once you go through it, then it's like, oh yeah, we can all do that.
Right. You can do it too.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's real. It's that was really good because with like most people, the practical stuff is like, I feel like the most helpful.
And I can live in practical land. I'm like, this is not even. Zane's gonna be like, "What'd you talk about?" And we're like, "Our budget spreadsheet and how to save money." He's gonna be like, "I knew you would. I knew you would go there."
No, it's so important though. It is. It's such a. It's so easy to live in ethereal land, but like the practical. There's a balance, right? Like
Right.
you can't be so practical that like
You're boring.
right. But which this has not been at all. You've said so many good things. I kind of want to. I know we're coming up towards the end of our time. I kind of want to wrap up with one more thing, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like to close with this idea of like rhythms. So you mentioned some of it like in the beginning with like what your guys' week looks like as a family, but so you could reiterate some of it or add new things to it. But really like in your situation, like mom, wife, creative, type A, all the stuff that you're, serving your clients, like all the things that you're doing. What are maybe some practical things? And this could be, for you, this may be more practical, but like
Sure.
what are some practical things you do to try and maintain healthy rhythms so that you're not, maybe burning out, you're not dropping
Right.
those balls often, you're not, what are some of those practical things for you that you do to maintain? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So a few things. This has been hard for me to learn rhythms. Just my natural bent is I can kind of get really into efficiency mode. So if something doesn't feel efficient to me, I won't always do it, which taking time for yourself is never like,
Right.
It's maybe the least efficient, but actually it's probably the most efficient. But I've like the practicals I try and start most mornings pretty slow and quiet. Like, well, that's not true. They start very quickly when our kids get up. And then as soon as Hannah gets there to watch the kids, then I usually go into my room and have some quiet time, read a book or read a thought for the day. Usually like the cheesier, the better, like In the Garden with God or something. That's my devotional right now. And just kind of have a moment or journal. I just want to be so much better at journaling and I'm just not. I also try to get some kind of movement every day. If that's a walk or, Pilates, or I've been trying to go to this right down the street from us. There's this infrared sauna place. And that has been, I started doing that ever since I had Shep. In the winter, I can get some pretty gnarly seasonal depression. So I needed some just like red light therapy. And it took me 34 years, I think, to learn that I didn't have to be sad all winter long. So even though I still am sometimes. So that I try and do that 2 or 3 times a week. I think my desire is I wish I had like everyday routine. And I just can't with our flow of some days, Monday, Friday, we don't have childcare in the mornings. Then River was going to school Tuesday, Thursday. So I can't always do the same morning thing. But I can tell now when I am starting to I'm starting to spiral a little bit or I'm starting to spin out a little bit. And I would love to say I was really good at like preventing this, but in this season I'm a lot more reactionary on it of like, ooh, I'm starting to feel some tension or some, my nervous system is a little vibrating or whatever. And then I'll be like, okay, I need to go either sauna for a minute or just go for a walk or maybe eat something that's green. Usually drink a green juice more than eating something green. And I can always tell when I'm trying to say something and I can't even tap into how I feel about something, that there's a disconnection happening inside of me, that like my head and my heart aren't quite synced up. And that's when I know I just need to pause for a moment and figure out how to get those two back in alignment so that I'm present and living, and I'm not like living 3 days ahead of because I can really get into that mode as well of like, I'm never even where I'm at. I'm thinking of the next thing that's due, or the next thing I need to help with, or the next thing I need to whatever. So I'm trying to do a lot more rhythms and practices where I'm like, I just have to be right here, right now. And like walking is so good for that. Like you can't even get somewhere fast. You're like, I have to slow down enough to literally walk somewhere. And I love that about spring and Kansas City and all of that. It's really easy to like just pause and have a moment and slow down. But yeah, that's kind of Zane and I can feel it in our marriage too, when we feel like it's been so full, we haven't connected. And I would love to say we have a rhythm of date night, but we don't. It's a lot more reactionary, which I think maybe this is not a right way of thinking, but I do think when kids get a little out of that super little age, that more people can watch them. It's easier to leave them. At this point, not everyone can put them to bed. It's a whole thing to get them to bed, So I do feel like in our marriage, we're trying our best right now, but I do think there will be more of a rhythm of an actual date night when they get a little older, and we're doing the best we can now. And sometimes that looks like eating popcorn together at 10 p.m. That's been like the last 3 nights versus like going out somewhere anyway. And honestly, we're kind of too tired, like not too tired. That's maybe an excuse, but I'm like, man, at the end of the day, like you want to do things that are recharging, not necessarily draining anymore. And sometimes the whole process of getting the babysitter, getting everything ready, getting the kids down, getting dressed, that's a little, in this season, it feels a little more draining than it is recharging. So we're trying to do our best, but that's a growth area for us for sure right now.
That's good. I think for everybody, kids or not, it still is, but especially with kids.
Yeah.
And with little. Yeah. Honestly, 4 and under, like under grade school.
Yeah.
Is just.
Before school. Yeah. It's its own. I mean, we don't know anything other than that, right? Like we don't know grade school, but 5 and under is all hands on deck type of situation for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
For real, you've said some really insightful things. I think I love your perspective. I love a lot of the stuff that I've been doing a lot of studying up on you, just on like some of the stuff that you've worked on. And you're so crazy talented, and I think you and Zane are like this crazy creative power couple. But like at the same time, like again, you guys just walk with integrity and you walk with humility. And I'm just thankful, even in the last couple months to have connected with Zane, and then now to connect with you. And you guys really are the real deal. Oh. And so I'm just really grateful for you guys. Even like both of you, like I'm just starting this thing and both of you have literally been in the first 5 episodes. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like you guys, even believe in like what I'm doing. And so anyways,
we totally do.
I'm just really grateful for you guys. Really grateful for your relationship and your friendship and who you guys are. And I'm excited for you guys. Excited for the next, 10, 15, 20 years as you guys continue to grow in what you're doing, continue to evolve and have kids that are in school, and then, take on a whole new, maybe your output triples, who knows, like who knows what you'll work on in the next 20 years, so I'm just really grateful. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for asking. I feel honestly, I know honored is I feel so honored that you would ask, and right back at you. We believe in you and Jess, and love the boys. And I love that, what was it, maybe like 6 months ago when we got to randomly meet down there at the coffee shop, and I mean, Rev and Riv, can you even like just down there on their scooters, and pretty sweet. So, it's cool to run parallel lives with you guys.
For sure.
We're pumped for this for you. I think it's really just the beginning. Sky's the limit, and we celebrate you in it too. Way to take a leap of faith, and any way we can help, we're behind you guys.
Thank you.
100%.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah.